Want to make money from your podcast even if you have a small audience? Today I'm going to cover 4 different ways you can monetize your podcast. Stick around and I will tell you more about sponsorships, digital products, and a couple other ways you can earn money for your show. First up, I want to start with probably the easiest one to get going, which is affiliate marketing. So if you are doing an educational podcast, something like this, for example, I could have links in the show notes for every episode that I do with my recommended microphone, the software I use to record, what software I use to edit, and if those were affiliate links, I would then get a percentage of sales anytime someone clicked through my link and signed up for a service or bought the product that I linked to. The thing to note here, though, is that some companies will have restrictions on who can and can't be an affiliate. So typically you just have to look around on the website, see if they do offer affiliate marketing. But this one is just pretty easy because it's relatively passive. You put the links in your show notes or in your email newsletter. Obviously, you can talk about those products if you want in your episodes, if it's something that fits in. So like if I were to do a gear recommendation episode of this podcast ever, I would certainly put some affiliate links in there. And it's just a nice way to get your show to start earning some money. However, when a lot of people think of monetizing their podcast, sponsorships are what they think of. And I'm going to break this down into 2 different categories because you have brand deals where you directly make a deal with a sponsor and you agree to a certain amount of money. And then there are dynamic ads, which typically these will be available through your podcast host, depending on what tier you have signed up for. So typically, if you're on a free tier or the starter tier, you might have to bump up one. Dynamic ads are a bit trickier, and then you have less control over what is going in your podcast. You can typically pick categories, but it's a lot harder to say, no, I don't want any Amazon or Starbucks ads in my podcast. So there's just a warning there on that. But if you're doing brand deals, that's better because you can really tailor that to your podcast audience. And you can typically get more money too, depending on how engaged your audience is, especially if you know that the product that you are looking to promote with the sponsor is something that your audience would really latch onto. So the key there is to go for more value-based pricing instead of cost per milli, which is cost per 1,000 downloads, which typically runs about $20 to $30 for every 1,000 downloads. So in the grand scheme of things, that dynamic ad model or the CPM model works a lot better for the larger shows. Number 3, we have paid resources. So if you are, again, doing an educational podcast or something where you can teach someone how to do something, you could have courses, ebooks, or some templates and use those as ways to help monetize your show. You promote those again in the show notes and in your email newsletter and hope that your listeners buy them. And obviously this will require a bit more work on the front end for you because you have to go and create those resources, but it is an option. And if you keep doing your show for a lengthy period of time, those can really pay off in the long run. And the 4th method is listener support. So this will be something like Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, Supercast, where people can either donate once or they can have a monthly subscription to get bonus content from you, which is what a lot of people do for their podcasts on Patreon. There are some that are really great examples of this, like Blank Check, which is a movie podcast that has a ton of bonus content if you sign up for their Patreon. And this is something you'll just want to set up, promote on your end in your episodes, again, in your newsletter, which if you don't have a newsletter for your podcast, you should definitely do that. I'll cover that in a different episode. But I really do think that making it easy for your listeners to support you is the key here, because I had a Patreon for my previous podcasts. And the thing that is nice about Patreon is that you get that monthly support, but typically you will have to offer something in return. And I like to try to offer something that is more than just an ad-free listening experience, mostly because my podcasts don't typically have ads in them anyway. But creating that extra content is also something you'll have to keep in mind to make sure you can stay on schedule with that. Or like I said, something that's just like a one-time donation link, like buy me a coffee, that is great as well. And obviously, you won't have that recurring income from that, but it is still nice to just, get a $5 donation every now and then. It helps cover your podcast hosting costs. But those are 4 different ways you can monetize your podcast, even with a small audience. Some of them do require a little more work, but you can always play around and see what works for your show and what doesn't, and then just stick with what you find is working. That is all I have for you today, though. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section. And thank you so much for watching. If you want to learn more about podcast monetization, check out my interview that I did with Ray Harkins, who works at Wondery.